I'm a civil engineer and I've been in the industry for 5 years. My first grad job was in construction and now I work in mining.
I studied software engineering at university before moving into a data scientist role at a financial startup. And I now work for a small software engineering startup where our main focus is computer vision technology.
I'm a graduate mechanical engineer and I've had vacation work experience in both mining and oil and gas.
When I was a second year graduate, I was working on a construction project and I was really excited to be given the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be given more responsibility. As an engineer on the project, it was my responsibility to make sure that all the services on the dial before you dig were identified. And as there were no services on the dial before you dig, I was happy and I signed off on the permit to commence excavation. One day during excavation, an 11 kilovolt cable was hit and it hadn't been on the dial before you dig. That's why it hadn't been located before excavation. I was called in for investigation by SafeWork and they immediately targeted the permitting system and why I'd signed off on all the permits saying we were okay to commence excavation. I thought I had done everything to the best of my ability to identify services and I thought it was really unfair that the blame was coming back at me when I thought that I had done my job. But SafeWork did say that we had access to the nearby substation, and even though the services weren't on the dial before you dig drawings, we should have gone through the substation to check for cables leading off it.
So computer vision technology is basically facial recognition and tracking and detection software of objects and people. The work I do relates quite heavily to artificial intelligence, and the premise of building a strong artificial intelligent model is by gathering as much information as you can. We're often working with law enforcement agencies to develop software and hardware, which means quite often sensitive information and sensitive videos are being run through our software and hardware. So in the past, my company has worked quite a lot with law enforcement agencies where sensitive information and data has been left on the software and hardware, and this has resulted in my colleagues and I coming to sort of a ethical dilemma. Because on one hand, we can inform the company that this data is still in the software and hardware and we still have access to it, or on the other hand, that we don't inform the company and we save it for ourselves for modeling and future progress. When my company started working with these agencies, my colleagues and I had to think quite heavily around how we were going to handle this information, because it was likely that a high percentage of it was safe. It was safe information. However, there was a small percentage that could have been used for criminal investigations and quite sensitive material that they would not want us viewing or using to improve our software. This data would provide huge value to the company and is basically at the core of building a good artificial intelligence model. So with that particular situation, we had to evaluate the impact of retaining the data, and throughout our workings we decided that it was best to inform them that they needed to securely wipe the hardware before they returned it to us.
So this wasn't an incident I was directly involved in, but I remember watching it all unfold. I was at a vacation work placement on an underground mine and my friend who was a diamond driller became very ill. My friend had to take time off work. Once he returned, I asked him what had happened and he mentioned that they had to use water from the bottom of the mine for drilling. As a result of this, people had skin reactions and as well as gastro. It wasn't until he approached his supervisor about the issue that something was done. Once the water was tested, it was found that there were excessively high E. coli levels in the water. This wasn't really surprising as there was only one toilet in the underground mine which ran 1 kilometre deep. Also, many of the people on the mine were using other areas of the mine as a toilet, if you know what I mean.
The investigation was really stressful because I didn't mean to do the wrong thing and I thought I was doing my job to the best of my ability, and I was really worried about my career and the implications that this could have on it, and the potential idea of having quite a large fine, which I definitely couldn't afford at that point because I just moved out of home. Luckily no one was injured because it was the main source of power to that substation excavation, so there was a lot of protective mechanisms implemented in the area. But if someone had been injured, or worse, they'd been killed, I would have had to have lived with that, and that really wasn't something that I'd considered having to take responsibility for within my career.
There's always going to be external pressures when it comes to something that can further aid your company's success, and this is where ethics and engineering inevitably sit. In this particular situation, there was a lot of external pressure on myself and a colleague of mine. We sort of went into it thinking upper management had quite a good handle on the situation. However, in hindsight, I think it ultimately came down to my decision.
I couldn't believe the water hadn't been tested prior to use and that it took so long for action to be taken. When my friend initially told me about the situation, I listened, but I didn't do anything about it because it wasn't my department, so I didn't follow up on the issue. Reflecting back on the situation, I could have done more to escalate the issue and made sure health and safety requirements were met. In reality, in good practice, the water should have been tested before use, as it is very unethical to expose people to these work environments when they are relying on others to make sure that this environment is safe for them.
The instance really opened my eyes to the importance of signing off on permits, because luckily I didn't get fined, but it could have so easily swung the other way, and that would have been really detrimental to my career so early on. Now, moving forward from the incident, I go above and beyond to double check that there are no services in the area before signing off for excavation and signing off permits.
But at the end of the day, people will always understand if you make what you think is the right decision based on objective reasoning. You need to know that you're not going to get fired, you're not going to get in trouble. If you make a decision based on justification and your own belief. I think, honestly, people are probably more likely to respect you if you make these decisions.
When you are new to the industry, you are much more vulnerable. Firstly, you don't really know what you're looking for. Everyone else is doing it and it seems fine. Once you become more educated, talk to more people, read things, it becomes apparent that these practices aren't so harmless.
I think the hardest thing about being a grad is you're always trying to please everyone, and you realise that's probably not the best way to go about everything.
You may not know how to communicate how you feel or why something isn't quite right, but once you learn to stand on your own 2 feet, you'll become much more comfortable doing this. This is why I think it is extremely important that we learn these skills before graduating university and entering the workforce.